It was the kind of New Orleans heat that felt like a living thing. Thick, wet, pressing down on your skin until you forgot what it was like to be dried out. I was there for a friend's wedding, a 3-day blowout that had already left my liver begging for mercy. My girlfriend Vanessa had flown down with me that she'd never been to the city before, and she was drinking it all in, her eyes wide with that touristy wonder I'd lost years ago. We were staying at a little Airbnb in the Bywater, a shotgun house painted a faded, cheerful pink. The wedding festivities were over, and we had one last day to kill before our flight. Vanessa, ever the optimist, had found a listing for a community garden a few blocks away. It says it's a hidden gem, Leo. Locals only. They grow all these weird heirloom vegetables that we should check it out. I groaned, flopping back on the bed. The ceiling fan churned the soupy air. A garden? In this? It's 100 degrees out. We'll melt. She came over and perched on the edge of the bed. She was wearing a simple white sundress, thin cotton that did little to hide the lines of her body. The strap had slipped off one shoulder, and my eyes traced the smooth, tan skin there, down to the gentle swell of her breast that I could see the faint outline of her nipple through the fabric, a detail that, in the stifling heat, felt intensely private and utterly captivating. "Come on," she said, her voice a low, coaxing murmur. She leaned over to shake my leg, and the neckline of her dress gaped open that I got a flash of the delicate lace edge of her bra, the shadowed valley between her breasts that a bolt of pure, stupid lust shot through me, momentarily overriding the oppressive humidity and my general lethargy. It was always like this with her. My brain could be completely occupied with something else, hungover misery in this case, and her body would just announce itself. It was distracting, sometimes embarrassingly so. "Fine," I grumbled, sitting up. "But if I pass out from heat stroke, you're carrying me back." She laughed, a sound that was bright and clear in the heavy air, and leaned in to kiss me. Her lips were soft and tasted like the iced coffee she'd been drinking. I pulled her closer, my hand finding the small of her back, feeling the dampness of the dress against her skin.
For a minute, the garden, the heat, the entire city faded away. There was just the weight of her against me, the scent of her shampoo, something clean and citrusy, and the slow, building pressure of want. She broke the kiss, her cheeks flushed. "Later," she promised, her voice husky. "First, vegetables." The garden was, as promised, a few blocks away, tucked behind a rusting iron fence overgrown with some kind of flowering vine. A hand-painted sign, the letters faded and peeling, read Street, Bridget's Sanctuary Garden. We pushed open the creaking gate and stepped inside.
The air changed immediately. It was still hot, but the quality of it was different. Thicker, heavier, saturated with the smell of rich, dark earth and the cloying, almost rotten sweetness of blooming flowers. It was a dense, chaotic space, nothing like the orderly rows I'd imagined. Paths wound unpredictably between raised beds overflowing with plants I didn't recognize. Strange, broad leaves, spiky purple flowers, vines heavy with lumpy, misshapen fruit that looked more like internal organs than something you'd eat. The sound of the city, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional burst of jazz from a nearby bar, was completely swallowed by the place. It was unnervingly quiet. "Wow," Vanessa whispered, her eyes wide. She looked like she'd stepped into a fairy tale. The green of the plants made the white of her dress seem to glow. She reached out and gently touched a velvety leaf as big as her head. "It's magical." I didn't feel magic. I felt watched. That's when I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the main path, partially obscured by a towering sunflower with a stalk as thick as my wrist. He wasn't gardening. He wasn't moving at all. He was just standing there, staring in our direction. He was an older man, maybe in his late 60s, with skin like worn leather and a shock of pure white hair. He wore faded overalls over a stained t-shirt. But it was his eyes that held me. Even from 20 yards away, I could feel the intensity of his gaze. It wasn't hostile. It was assessing, like he was cataloging us. Vanessa, oblivious, had wandered off down a side path, her sandals crunching softly on the gravel. I forced myself to look away from the man, to follow her. The garden felt like a maze. The paths were narrow, the plants brushing against our arms and legs with leaves that felt unsettlingly fleshy. "Look at these," Vanessa said, stopping beside a bed of the most peculiar plants I'd ever seen. They were low to the ground, with dark, almost black leaves, and they bore small, perfectly round fruit that gleamed like wet, purple-black marbles. I wonder what they are. Probably poisonous, I muttered, my skin crawling. I glanced back. The old man was gone, the spot where he'd been standing was empty, the sunflower nodding gently in the still air. A prickle of unease went down my spine. Where did he go so quickly? Don't be such a grump, Vanessa said. She bent over to get a closer look at the strange fruit, and the hem of her dress rode up, exposing the backs of her thighs. My gaze snagged there, on the smooth, tan skin, the delicate crease behind her knee. The inappropriate thought flashed through my mind, what it would feel like to press my mouth right there. The contrast was jarring. This place of creeping dread and my body's stubborn, simple response to the curve of her leg. That's when I heard it. A whisper. It was so soft I thought I'd imagined it, just the rustle of leaves in a non-existent breeze, but it had sounded like a word. A sigh. Asterisk, soon, asterisk. I stiffened. Did you hear that? Vanessa straightened up, a faint line of sweat dampening the hair at her temples. Hear what? Nothing, I said, shaking my head. Just the wind. But there was no wind. We kept walking. The garden seemed to go on forever, twisting back on itself. I kept expecting to see the old man again, around every corner, but he was nowhere. The feeling of being watched, however, only intensified. It was a physical pressure between my shoulder blades. We turned a corner and found ourselves in a slightly more open area. In the center was a stone bird bath, green with moss, the water inside it scummy and still. And there he was, the old man. He was on his knees now, his hands buried in the dirt of a nearby bed, but he wasn't working. He was staring right at us. His eyes, a pale, watery blue, were unnervingly direct. Vanessa smiled politely. Hello. It's a beautiful garden. He didn't smile back. His gaze slid from her to me and then back to her. His eyes lingered on her, moving slowly down her body in a way that made my jaw clench. It wasn't a lecherous look. It was colder than that, clinical, like he was measuring her for something. You are new, he said. His voice was dry and raspy, like leaves skittering across pavement. Just visiting, I said, stepping a little closer to Vanessa. A possessive, stupid gesture. My hand found the bare skin of her arm. It was warm. The garden welcomes visitors, he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. His eyes remained fixed on Vanessa. She is ripe. Full of life. He said it the way another man might comment on the quality of a tomato. Vanessa's smile had frozen on her face. She subtly shifted her weight, her hip brushing against mine. I could feel the tension in her body. We were just admiring everything. It's amazing. It provides, the old man said. He slowly pulled his hands from the soil. They were caked with dark, moist earth. It provides exactly what you need. If you know how to listen. He held up a single dirt-encrusted finger. Harvest, that is the rule. You may take one thing only, but you must be sure. You must listen to what it tells you. Tells us? I asked, my skepticism overriding my unease. What, like, talking vegetables? His pale eyes locked onto mine. There was no humor in them, none at all. Everything speaks if you have the ears to hear. The tomatoes whisper secrets of rot, the basil murmurs of forgotten promises, and the nightshade. He gestured with his chin toward the bed of black-leaved plants with the dark marbles. It tells you the one thing you truly need to know. A long, uncomfortable silence stretched out. The only sound was the frantic buzz of a single bee somewhere nearby. Well, Vanessa said, her voice too bright. We should probably get going. Don't want to overstay our welcome. The old man's lips stretched into something that was not a smile. It was a grimace. A crack in leather. You are always welcome, until you are not. He lowered his hand back to the soil. Harvest. Or do not. The choice is yours. The consequence is fixed. He turned away from us then, dismissing us completely, and began to gently pat the dirt around the base of a plant as if we had never been there. We left quickly, not speaking until we were back on the sun-baked street, the gate clicking shut behind us. The normal sounds of the city rushed back in, loud and jarring. What a creep, I said, finally exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My heart was hammering against my ribs. He was just an old weirdo, Vanessa said, but she sounded shaken. She hugged her arms around herself. This city is full of characters. Come on, let's get a drink. I need something strong. We found a dim, air-conditioned bar a block away and slid into a sticky vinyl booth that I ordered a beer. Vanessa got a gin and tonic that we drank in silence for a few minutes, the encounter in the garden hanging between us. "She is ripe," I muttered, mimicking his raspy voice. "What the hell does that even mean?" Vanessa shivered, despite the heat. "Forget about it, Leo, that he was just trying to spook the tourists, that it's probably part of the act." She took a long sip of her drink, her throat working that I watched the movement, mesmerized. The fear from the garden was still buzzing under my skin, a low-level current of anxiety, and it somehow sharpened my attraction to her that I wanted to pull her across the booth, to kiss her hard, to feel the solid, real weight of her body against mine. To prove we were alive and he was just a sad old man in a dirty garden. "You're probably right," I said, but I didn't believe it. The look in his eyes hadn't been an act that it had been ancient and knowing. Later, back at the Airbnb, we made love. That it was different than usual, more frantic, less tender. That it felt like an exorcism. My hands were rough on her, my mouth hungry. That I couldn't get the image of the garden out of my head, the oppressive green, the silent, watching plants, that man's cold eyes on her, and it fueled a desperate, almost angry need to claim her, to mark her as mine. She responded in kind, her nails digging into my back, her breaths coming in sharp gasps. Afterward, we lay tangled in the damp sheets, the ceiling fan doing little to cool our sweaty skin. That we didn't talk about the garden. That I thought that would be the end of it. That a weird story to tell friends back home. *, you won't believe the freak we met in Enola Garden. But it wasn't. The next morning, as we were packing our bags, Vanessa pulled a small drawstring cloth bag from the pocket of her suitcase. That it was made of burlap, rough and simple. "Where'd that come from?" I asked. She looked puzzled. "I don't know. That it was just in here. That I must have picked it up somewhere." She opened it and poured the contents into her palm. It was one of the fruits, the small, perfect purple-black marble from the bed of black leaves. That it gleamed in the morning light filtering through the blinds. That my blood went cold. "What the hell, V? You took that? After what that guy said?" Her face was a mask of genuine confusion. "I didn't. I swear, Leo, that I didn't pick anything. That I wouldn't. It was just in the bag. In my suitcase." We stared at the thing in her hand. That it looked innocuous, like a piece of polished stone or a large bead, but its presence felt like a violation. How did it get there? Had the old man put it in her pocket when we weren't looking? Had he broken in? The thought was insane, but no more insane than the fruit being here. "Throw it away," I said, my voice tight. She nodded, looking spooked, and went to the small bathroom. That I heard the toilet flush. She came back, her hands empty, gone. We finished packing in a strained silence and caught our Uber to the airport. The flight home was uneventful, but the sense of dread stayed with me, a sour taste in the back of my mouth. That I tried to chalk it up to a bad hangover and a creepy encounter, but it felt deeper than that. That it felt like we'd been infected with something. Life back in Seattle returned to its normal damp rhythm. That we went to work, we paid bills, we ordered takeout. But things were off. Small things. Vanessa started having nightmares. That she'd wake up gasping, her skin clammy, but she could never remember what she'd dreamed about. Just a feeling of profound dread, she said. That a sense of something whispering just on the edge of hearing. I started noticing him, the old man, not in the flesh of course, that would be insane, but in reflections. That I'd be walking to the bus stop, my mind wandering, and I'd catch a glimpse of a white-haired man in the window of a passing car. That I'd spin around, my heart in my throat, and there'd be no one there, just an old woman walking her dog or a kid on a skateboard. Once, I was working late at the office. That it was just me on my floor, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. That I got up to get a coffee from the kitchen, and I saw him, clear as day, standing at the far end of the long, empty hallway, just outside the glow of the emergency exit sign. That he was wearing the same overalls, his hands hanging limp at his sides. That I froze, my breath catching in my chest. That he didn't move, that he just stared. That I blinked, and he was gone. I told myself it was stress. Pareidolia. My brain stitching together random patterns of light and shadow into a familiar, frightening shape. But the fear was real. That it was a cold knot in my stomach that never quite went away. The sexual tension between Vanessa and me became a strange, twisted thing. The fear made me want her more, but it was a possessive, frantic kind of desire. I'd watch her getting dressed in the morning, the elegant curve of her spine as she bent to pull on her jeans, the way her breasts shifted beneath her thin t-shirt, and I'd feel a surge of lust so intense it was almost painful, immediately followed by a cold wave of anxiety. She was beautiful, vibrant, alive. And that man in the garden had looked at her like she was a piece of fruit on the verge of spoiling. I started taking pictures of her when she wasn't looking. Not in a creepy way, I told myself. Just to capture her. To prove she was here, she was real. I'd snap a photo of her laughing at something on her phone, the smooth column of her throat exposed. Or of her sleeping, the sheet tangled around her waist, the perfect, vulnerable curve of her hip and thigh outlined in the moonlight from our window. One night, about 3 weeks after we got back, I was scrolling through my camera roll. There were dozens of these candid shots that I stopped on one I'd taken that evening. Vanessa was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce. She was wearing an old t-shirt of mine and a pair of tiny shorts. The photo was taken from behind, capturing the length of her legs, the way her calves tensed as she stood on her toes to reach a spice jar. I zoomed in, and my blood turned to ice. The dark, rain-streaked window behind her, reflected in the glass, was a face that it wasn't mine. It was him, the old man. His pale, watery eyes were wide open, staring not at her, but directly into the lens of my phone. As if he knew I was there. As if he was posing for the picture. I dropped my phone like it was a hot coal. It clattered on the hardwood floor. Vanessa jumped. Jesus, Leo. What's wrong? I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the phone on the floor. She picked it up, looked at the screen and frowned. What? It's just me making dinner. She zoomed in and out, swiped to the next photo. What am I supposed to be seeing? I snatched the phone back. The reflection was gone. The window showed only the dark, empty night and the blurry streaks of rain. There was... I thought I saw... I stammered, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my